professor, physician, epidemiologist. I am Dr. Sri Banerjee. One in 5 individuals within the United States have some sort of sexually transmitted infection. I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Baldwin University. And in this video, I'm going to talk about not only the geographic distribution of sexually transmitted infections in the year 2021, according to County Health Rankings data, but also I'm going to go over some of the physiology of sexually transmitted infections and try to make the case here that sexually transmitted infections are not just under the purview of infectious diseases, but people that are thinking about chronic diseases too need to be thinking about sexually transmitted infections. So for starters, thinking about how prevalent this is. So I said 1 in 5, but in fact, if you look in specific age groups, younger adults and older adolescents, then the rate of sexually transmitted infections is in fact 1 in 2. So this is quite high, and the cost is in the billions of dollars to try to treat sexually transmitted infections. So if we go in and actually look at areas where there's higher prevalence, we can go into South Georgia and the southern part of the southern states, and take a look at the higher preponderance and higher prevalence of sexually transmitted infections. So this informs policymakers, and there's actually case studies out there where how do you determine the placement of an additional health clinic when you're thinking about saving resources, but also be able to serve the maximum number of individuals within the local communities. So as you can see in the southern part of Atlanta, there's definitely greater need, but something that is interesting to see, which is different than if you viewed any of my other videos. I did a separate one on food access, and even in the areas that there are higher food access, it seems like there's also higher STIs, rates of STIs. So this is DeKalb County, and I lived in DeKalb County for quite a number of years, so I kind of know the layout of the county. Comparatively, Gwinnett County is a more wealthy county, and so there's also, as expected, higher life expectancy and lower rates of STIs. So just thinking about a lot of the other areas, let's kind of zoom out here and take a look at South Carolina, and then take a look at the Washington DC area, and there's definitely higher rates of STIs in some of these areas. So just follow along and take a look at some of the local areas that you're interested in finding out more about, and then take a look. If you look in Pennsylvania, not only Philadelphia, which is a highly populated area, but also Harrisburg and Pittsburgh have higher rates. Allegheny County have higher rates than the rest of the state. So you can look at this and kind of draw your conclusions here. But the second part of this that I want to spend some time going over is talking about how this can be understood, especially gonorrhea, which there's a higher preponderance of as a chronic disease or a causative agent for chronic disease. So if you think about all the gonorrhea infections and all the sexually transmitted infections, I'm going to draw a chart here and basically show you. So if you have, let me switch to an actual pen here. So if you think of gonorrhea and if you think of the STIs, then about 10 to 40% actually are left untreated. And there lies the problem, because once this is untreated, this turns into something called PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. And so what happens is some of this infection, so if you think of this as the ovaries and the fallopian tube, and just think about this as a uterus, right in here, in this small area, a lot of times infections get sealed, and so it's not really diagnosed. So what you need to do then is, take a course of antibiotics, of course, go to get treated. But if you don't know that the infection is there, then this can lead to something known as also ectopic pregnancy. And so there's two things that PID can lead to. One is ectopic pregnancy, and the second is infertility. So these are all conditions which are not ideal, and actually chronic conditions which are resulting from infectious diseases. And so I want you to be thinking about, when you're thinking about infectious diseases, be thinking about interchangeably how this relates to certain chronic diseases. And then more specifically, kind of be thinking about how even, for instance, conditions like viruses eventually lead to chronic diseases like cancer. So if you're thinking about human papillomavirus, can you think of the cancer that is most typically associated with this? If you guess cervical cancer, certain types of subtypes of cervical cancer, HPV 16 and 18, actually result in cervical cancer. So in a nutshell, if we're thinking about infectious diseases, and when you're thinking about infectious disease epidemiology, you have to be thinking about chronic diseases, or else we're not thinking completely. So this is kind of the way you do epidemiological studies, and this is an approach. I hope all of this helps you be thinking along these lines. Thank you for listening.